So the next step we're going to talk about is screening your applicants. Basically how to tell the good from the bad. And probably a lot of times, especially in this economy, you've probably got way more applicants than you do jobs. It's not always like that. 10 years ago when I worked here in Denver, people were literally just hiring anybody that could breathe. They had a pulse. We'd put them in the drivers, and if they, played bumper cars for a while, all right, at least somebody operated the truck. Today it's a little easier, but it's important that when we have all these applicants, that we screen them properly and thoroughly. So, is it better to have one driver to work for you for 10 years or 20 drivers to work for 6 months? A couple slides back, we showed that the cost of turnover. So it's definitely, to your company, it's a much better advantage to have those drivers on a long-term basis rather than have short-term drivers. And I think all the insurance guys in here will tell you that new drivers have a lot more accidents than existing drivers or long-term drivers. So again, this really has effect on your safety record also. 80% of your time should be spent targeting quality drivers rather than quantity. Remember, we want to not do that shotgun effect. We want to laser in on who are our best candidates and what can we do to help try to bring those people aboard and keep them aboard. A sloppy or incomplete application should tell you a lot about the driver. Again, that's their first impression of your company. And if they can't fill it out properly, or if it's in crayon, or you can't read it, or there's huge gaps in there, that should tell you a lot about them. And maybe that's one that should go to the bottom of the pile immediately. So look for that complete application that's well written, and it's going to give you a good first impression of that driver. What's not on an application could tell you more than what's on it. Sometimes there's gaps in employment, and when you ask those questions, the guys say, yeah, I was in prison then, yeah, I had a meth thing, no big deal, but I'm back ready to work now. So again, that should tell you a lot about a driver, but you've made so many employers don't ask about those questions. Or I've had employers before that's, they come to find out after they hire a driver that he was fired from the last place because he stole from them. But all they had to do was ask about that gap in employment. Why was it there? Tell me some circumstances around that. The driver probably would have told them, or if they would have checked with the previous employer, they probably would have told them. It would have been a chance for them not to do that bad hire. And short stints of employment should also tell you something about that driver, especially if you're looking to retain those drivers. It's always better to have to hire somebody that's maybe had long stints in some place and is maybe looking for an advancement in their career rather than working someplace for 2-3 weeks, 2-3 weeks, 2-3 weeks, or 2-3 months. Again, that application would tell you a lot about that employee, who you should go after, and who you should put to the bottom of the pile. More than just their potential supervisors should do that personal interview, because a lot of times, especially the potential supervisor, they might just be wanting a warm body. You know what, we're way behind, we need somebody, I'm going to hire the first guy that comes in here and can speak English and looks halfway presentable. So by maybe having a couple more people involved in that process, again, we'll target those good drivers, the drivers that are going to be with us for a while. We don't want to hire out of desperation. You should provide the interviewer with some training to help them identify potential problems with a candidate. How many of you have actually done training with your potential interviewers in the past? Or your supervisors? You really should. A lot of times, just because a guy has been here a long time doesn't necessarily mean that he has the tools to properly do an interview, to ask the right questions, and provide the right background information on that potential candidate. You should be diligent in your check of past employment. And you guys that have CDL drivers, you have to do that as part of the process when you're building a DQ file. But even people that aren't CDL drivers, you should really be diligent in checking their past employment, because a lot of times you can find out a lot about their character and about their work abilities by checking that past employment. And then, take your time being careful and consistent with your applicants. It will greatly help to reduce your chances of making that bad hire. So again, don't hire out of desperation. Take your time. When you take your time, it'll pay off in the end because you'll get better quality employees. So now that we've gone through the process, we've trained them, we started to hire them, now we've got to train them. So, how many of your companies have a formal training program in place? Some of you? A lot of other people just have OJT. Yep, he rides with another guy for 2 days and then we turn him loose. Typically, that's not a good training program. And a lot of times when you have new employees and they feel like they're not being trained properly, you could lose them. I had a client once who redesigned their training program because they hired a new employee. He showed up on the first day. They weren't ready. He sat in the waiting room for 3 hours waiting for his trainer to come. After a while, he said, I'm going to run outside and grab something from the car. I'll be right back. That's the last they ever saw that guy. So again, we spent a lot of time and a lot of money hiring that employee, but because we didn't properly train him or weren't prepared to train him, we lost him. So it's important, be prepared. And then also, who trained your trainer? I think one of the other speakers hit on this a little bit earlier. You should provide training to your trainer because who knows what kind of training they received initially or what kind of bad habits they've picked up or if they're even aware of maybe some of the company rules that are out there. If you provide poor training to a new candidate, we've just started them off with a poor toolbox to work off in the future, and the chances of them having accidents, not following company rules, and probably leaving the company have increased greatly. And again, like we talked about, be ready on the first day. Have a plan for your new employees in the training process. Don't expect too much from a new driver. They can't do everything that a current driver has. They need to learn the company standards, the policies, their job, and how to operate the equipment. So we should have limited expectations for that new driver, at least initially. We need to make sure you ask them how the training is going. A lot of times just a simple, hey, how's it going? You learning everything you need to? How's the trainer treating you? You have any questions about what's going on? Is it what you expected? Just some little simple things, just some little simple interactions could make that person feel a lot more comfortable in their new job opportunity, and the chances of them being retained for your company have been increased greatly. And before you release them to regular duties, make sure that they're comfortable with their job. I think we've all probably had jobs before where we got in there, done the training, and then we feel like we're not comfortable. They kick in the butt and say, okay, get to work. So we need to make sure that they're ready. So we've trained the drivers. Now the most important part is retaining the drivers. Because what retaining drivers does, it increases the safety, productivity, and it reduces cost to our organization. So what are some of the benefits of retention? There's an enormous cost associated with finding, screening, and training drivers. We've talked about that already. New drivers traditionally have more accidents than company veterans. I think there's all kinds of studies that show that. New drivers often face issues with equipment, whether unfamiliar or it's a new type of equipment to them. New drivers are definitely harder on equipment, like we talked about. And the harder on equipment, the more it breaks, the more it ends up costing your company maintenance costs. And new drivers definitely have less productivity because not only are they learning a new job, but they're learning new equipment. So these are all costs. So if we can retain these new employees, it will save our company money. So when somebody does unfortunately leave your organization, it's important to do exit interviews. How many of you do exit interviews or any type of exit interviews with drivers? No. How many of them last over 5 minutes? Yeah, exactly. I think we've all had exit interviews before. They go, where are you going? All right, see you later, have fun, it's been nice working with you. That's not a good exit interview. So here's some of the questions that you should probably ask. What made you want to join us? Why are you leaving? Just, again, basic questions, but spend more than 5 minutes. When you're doing an exit interview, this is your chance to talk to that employee to figure out what went wrong and what we can do in the future to help retain these types of employees. Get more exit interview questions. What recommendations would you have for improving our driver safety program? Again, that's your chance to get free data from somebody that's leaving, learn from your mistakes, and hopefully, again, help retention in the future. Use the data from the exit interviews to enhance training and your coaching practices in the future. And discuss the finding of exit interviews with hiring managers and supervisors to help them identify, well-suited candidates or candidates that maybe they should stay away from in the future. Again, learn from your mistakes. And then within 2 months, it's important to maybe send a good former employee, is the grass really as green as you thought it was letter, or a bounce back letter is what we call it in the industry. Because sometimes people will, hear a good story, move someplace else, and figure out, boy, this ain't what they told me it was. So sometimes by sending just a simple letter to that employee, like, boy, we sure enjoyed working with you. If you ever want to come back, boy, we'd love to have you back. You'd be amazed how well that works sometimes. And the time and the cost associated with retraining those employees is typically a lot less. How many of you do bounce back letters or anything like that? It's a very important thing. It's very easy to do. It doesn't take any time. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for your time.